The air was filled with anticipation and the sweet scent of flowers as I stood at the entrance of the grand ballroom. It was the day of my wedding, the day of my wedding, the day I would marry the love of my life, David. My heart fluttered with excitement and nerves as I took in the sight before me. The room was adorned with elegant decorations, sparkling lights, and a breathtaking floral arrangement at the center of the room. My bridesmaids, dressed in flowing pastel gowns, stood beside me, their smiles contagious. They offered words of encouragement and reassurance, ensuring that every detail was perfect. "Sophia, you look absolutely stunning," one of my bridesmaids exclaimed, her voice filled with genuine admiration. I glanced down at my white satin gown, its intricate lace embellishments delicately hugging my curves. The veil cascading down my back added an ethereal touch to my appearance. My heart swelled with gratitude for the incredible support and love that surrounded me on this special day. As the music began to play, signaling the start of the ceremony, my father appeared at my side, his eyes filled with pride and love. "Are you ready, my dear?" he asked, his voice filled with emotion. Taking a deep breath, I smiled at my father, feeling a mix of excitement and a touch of nervousness. "Yes, Dad," I replied, my voice tinged with anticipation. "I'm ready." The gentle melody filled the room as my father and I walked down the aisle, every step bringing me closer to the man who would soon become my husband. David stood at the altar, his eyes fixed on me with adoration. His tuxedo was perfectly tailored, accentuating his strong frame. The sight of him waiting for me at the end of the aisle filled my heart with warmth and reassurance. As we stood together, our hands intertwined, the ceremony commenced. The words spoken by the officiant felt like a symphony of love and commitment. David and I exchanged heartfelt vows, promising to support and cherish each other through the highs and lows of life. When the officiant pronounced us husband and wife, a wave of joy washed over me. David leaned in, whispering in my ear, "You're my forever, Sophia." Tears of happiness welled up in my eyes as I whispered back, "And you're mine, David." The room erupted into applause and cheers as we shared our first kiss as a married couple. It was a moment frozen in time, a testament to our love and the beginning of our happily ever after. As we walked hand in hand back down the aisle, the cheers followed us, echoing through the hall. Love surrounded us, enveloping us in a warm embrace. I couldn't have asked for a more perfect start to our life together. Little did I know that the challenges we would face lay hidden beneath the surface, waiting to test the strength of our bond. But for now, in this moment, I held on to the magic and beauty of our fairy tale wedding, cherishing the love that had brought us here. Life after our fairy tale wedding felt like a dream. David and I settled into our beautiful home, basking in the bliss of newlywed love. But little did I know that lurking behind the facade of happiness, a storm was brewing. A storm named Agnes, my mother-in-law. At first, Agnes had welcomed me into the family with open arms. She showered me with compliments and affection, making me feel like a cherished daughter. But as time passed, her behavior started to change, like a chameleon revealing its true colors. One evening, as David and I sat down for dinner, Agnes's snide remarks began to pierce the air. "Sophia, don't you think you should learn how to cook properly? A woman should know her way around the kitchen," she remarked, her tone laced with disapproval. Taken aback, I exchanged a glance with David, hoping he would intercede. But he remained silent, focused on his plate. Summoning my courage, I responded, "Agnes, I'm still learning, but I'm doing my best. Cooking is an art that I'm willing to master." Agnes scoffed, her eyes narrowing with contempt. "Well, you have a long way to go. I can't believe my son married someone like you." She spat out, her words like venomous arrows. My heart sank, wounded by her harsh words. I looked at David, seeking solace, but his gaze remained fixed on his plate, a wall of indifference slowly building between us. Days turned into weeks, and Agnes's mistreatment intensified. She would criticize my appearance, my housekeeping skills, and even the way I spoke. Her nagging became incessant, creating a suffocating atmosphere in our once happy home. One evening, after enduring yet another verbal onslaught from Agnes, I couldn't bear it any longer. Tears streamed down my face as I confronted David, seeking his support. "David, your mother's treatment of me is unbearable. I can't understand what I've done to deserve this," I pleaded, my voice quivering with pain. David's face contorted with anger, his voice rising. "Sophia, stop exaggerating. You're making a monster out of my mother. She's just concerned about our well-being. You need to learn to get along with her," he snapped, his words stinging like a slap. I recoiled, wounded by his dismissive response. The man I married, the man I believed would always stand by my side, had chosen his mother's side over mine. In that moment, the dark clouds of doubt and despair began to gather, casting a shadow over the love we once shared. Little did I know that this was just the beginning of a tumultuous journey, one that would test the strength of my spirit and force me to confront the toxic dynamic that had seeped into our lives. The weight of my mother-in-law's mistreatment pressed heavily on my heart, but I couldn't let it consume me. Determined to salvage our marriage, I decided to confide in David, hoping that he would understand the depth of my pain and intervene on my behalf. One evening, as we sat together in our living room, I mustered the courage to open up. "David, I need to talk to you about something important," I began, my voice trembling with a mix of anxiety and vulnerability. He glanced up from his book, his expression guarded. "What is it, Sophia?" he replied, his voice tinged with indifference. I took a deep breath, trying to find the right words. "It's about your mother, Agnes. Her treatment towards me has become unbearable. The constant criticism, the harsh words, it's affecting me deeply," I confessed, tears welling up in my eyes. David's face contorted with anger, his brows furrowing. "Sophia, I can't believe you're making such a big deal out of this. You're exaggerating her behavior," he retorted, his tone dismissive. The disappointment and pain surged through me, leaving me feeling unheard and invalidated. "David, I'm not exaggerating. I'm sharing my truth, and it hurts that you don't see how much this is affecting me," I pleaded, my voice trembling with emotion. His eyes hardened, and his voice grew sharp. "You're the one who's causing problems, Sophia. You've always had a way of making things difficult." He lashed out, his words like daggers piercing my heart. I sat in stunned silence, the realization sinking in that my husband was unwilling to acknowledge the truth of my suffering. The bond we once shared seemed to crumble before my eyes, replaced by a wall of denial and hostility. Days turned into weeks, and the tension between us grew thicker. David's loyalty to his mother remained unwavering, and my pleas for understanding fell on deaf ears. I felt isolated and alone, like a small boat adrift in a sea of uncertainty. As time passed, I couldn't help but notice the absence of my father's comforting presence. The illness that had plagued him grew more severe, and the thought of losing him weighed heavily on my heart. I approached David, desperation in my eyes. "David, Dad's condition is deteriorating. I need you by my side during this difficult time. Please come with me to visit him," I implored, my voice filled with a mix of sorrow and longing. He sighed, his tone wary. "Sophia, I have too much on my plate right now. I can't just drop everything for your father. I have my own responsibilities," he replied, his words stabbing at my already wounded soul. The tears streamed down my face as I realized the depth of his indifference. In that moment, I understood that our connection had been severed, and the foundations of our marriage had crumbled beneath the weight of neglect and selfishness. Heartbroken, I made the painful journey to visit my father alone. The weight of his illness and the absence of my husband felt like a heavy burden, but I held on to the love and strength my father had instilled in me throughout my life. Little did I know that this visit would mark a turning point, a revelation that would shake the core of my existence and force me to confront the harsh reality of the relationships I held dear. The somber atmosphere of the hospital room engulfed me as I stood by my father's bedside. His frail form lay motionless, the machines providing a constant hum in the background. The illness that had plagued him had taken its toll, leaving him weak and vulnerable. Tears welled up in my eyes as I held his hand, trying to find solace in the memories of his strength and love. "Dad, please hold on. You have to fight," I whispered, my voice choked with emotion. His eyes flickered open, a weak smile forming on his lips. "Sophia, my dear, you've always been my strength." "Remember that," he murmured, his voice barely audible. My heart ached as I witnessed his declining state. The weight of his impending departure pressed heavily on my chest, and the absence of my husband's support during this trying time only intensified the pain. In the days that followed, my father's condition deteriorated rapidly. I spent every moment by his side, clutching onto the fragments of time we had left. The doctor's efforts were in vain, and on a fateful night, he took his last breath, leaving a void in my heart that would never be filled. As grief consumed me, I reached out to David, seeking comfort and understanding. "David, I need you now more than ever. I've lost my father and I'm crumbling under the weight of this sorrow," I pleaded, my voice trembling with grief. He glanced at me, his expression distant. "Sophia, I'm sorry for your loss, but I have my own priorities. I can't be there for you right now," he responded, his words devoid of empathy. Shock washed over me as I realized the depths of his indifference. The one person I thought I could lean on had turned his back on me in my darkest hour. The realization left me shattered, aching for the support and comfort that had been denied. The day of the funeral arrived, and my heart felt heavy with sorrow. The absence of both David and my mother-in-law was conspicuous, a painful reminder of the fractured relationships that surrounded me. Despite the absence of the two people who should have been there, I gathered strength from the love and memories my father had left behind. After bidding my father a final farewell, I found solace in his will. It revealed a profound act of love and generosity, a bequest of $100 million that he had left solely for me. Gratitude overwhelmed me as I realized the immense gift my father had bestowed upon me. Unable to contain my excitement and the desire to share this news with my husband, I approached David, hoping for a glimmer of support. "David, I have something to tell you. David, I have something to tell you. Dad left me an inheritance. $100 million. It's a blessing, and I want us to use it to build a better future together," I exclaimed, my voice filled with hope. David's eyes gleamed with a mixture of greed and entitlement. "Sophia, we should give that money to my mother. It rightfully belongs to her. She needs it more than we do," he demanded, his voice tinged with an unsettling tone. The shock of his demand jolted through me. "David, this money is my father's gift to me, and I want to use it to create a better life for us. I won't give it away blindly," I declared, determination lacing my words. Days later, the pressure mounted as both my mother-in-law and David relentlessly pursued their demands. Threats of divorce hung in the air, causing my world to crumble. With tears streaming down my face, I ran away from our shared home, seeking refuge from the toxicity that had consumed our relationship. In the depths of my despair, a flicker of determination ignited within me. It was time to find my own path, to stand up against the cruelty that had torn me apart. Little did they know that this would be the beginning of a journey towards self-discovery and the reclamation of my own worth. The weight of betrayal hung heavily in the air as I navigated the treacherous aftermath of my father's passing and the revelation of my substantial inheritance. The love and support I had longed for from David seemed like a distant memory, replaced by greed and entitlement. With a heavy heart, I approached David, desperately hoping to bridge the growing chasm between us. "David, I need you to understand the significance of this inheritance. It was my father's gift to me, and I want us to use it wisely to create a better future for ourselves," I implored, my voice laced with sincerity. He crossed his arms, a stubborn resolve etched on his face. "Sophia, you're being selfish. That money should go to my mother. She deserves it more than anyone," he retorted, his tone unwavering. Tears welled up in my eyes as I realized the depth of his greed and his inability to see beyond his own desires. "David, my father left this inheritance for me, not for your mother. I cannot simply hand it over without considering our own needs and future," I pleaded, my voice shaking with a mixture of sadness and determination. Days turned into weeks as the pressure mounted, with both David and my mother-in-law relentlessly demanding access to the inheritance. The threat of divorce loomed over me like a dark cloud, tearing at the frayed threads of our once promising marriage. With a heavy heart and a mind burdened by betrayal, I made a difficult decision. The next time they confronted me, demanding the money, I stood my ground. "I will not give you the inheritance," I declared, my voice trembling with newfound strength. "This money was left for me, and I intend to use it to build a future free from your control and manipulation." David's face twisted with anger, his voice laced with venom. "How dare you defy me? If you refuse, I will divorce you. You will have nothing," he threatened. He threatened, his words meant to instill fear. Tears streamed down my face as I realized the depth of the deceit and cruelty I had endured. In that moment, I found the strength to break free from the chains that bound me. "If divorce is what it takes for me to escape this toxic relationship, then so be it," I replied, my voice steady with resolve. "I deserve better than this." With my heart pounding, I fled our shared home, seeking solace and a plan for my future. The pain of leaving behind the life I had once cherished was immense, but the freedom that lay ahead was worth the sacrifice. In the refuge of a friend's house, I carefully strategized. The inheritance my father had left me was a tool for liberation, a means to reclaim my life and protect myself from further harm. With every ounce of determination, I resolved to use the money to secure my independence and build a life of my own. The day came when my husband and mother-in-law returned from their vacation, unaware of the storm that awaited them. As they entered the new house that I had purchased with the inheritance, their voices filled the air with anger and entitlement. They demanded the money once more, believing they held power over me. But with a newfound strength, I stood before them, holding the divorce papers in my hand. "I'm not married," I declared, my voice ringing with defiance. "You have no claim over me or my father's inheritance." Shock and disbelief painted their faces as they realized the tables had turned. In that moment, I knew I had taken control of my own destiny, severed the toxic ties that bound me, and reclaimed my autonomy. As they left, their voices filled with rage and regret, I closed the door behind them, feeling a sense of liberation wash over me. The weight that had burdened my heart for so long had been lifted, replaced by the sweet taste of revenge. A revenge that ultimately led me to the path of self-discovery and a life free from their toxic grasp. The air was thick with tension as I confronted the daunting reality of divorce. The fallout from my decision to stand up against my husband and mother-in-law's relentless demands had brought us to a breaking point. Emotions ran high, and the once promising future I had envisioned now seemed shrouded in uncertainty. Days turned into weeks as the divorce proceedings loomed over us like a dark cloud. David and my mother-in-law became even more relentless in their pursuit of the inheritance, using every opportunity to assert their claims. The pressure intensified, and I found myself on the receiving end of countless threats and ultimatums. One evening, as I sat down with David to discuss the impending divorce, the room felt heavy with unspoken words. "Sophia, we need to come to an agreement," he began, his voice cold and distant. "Give us the inheritance, and we can end this quickly and amicably." I took a deep breath, summoning every ounce of courage within me. "David, the inheritance is mine, left to me by my father. It is not for you or your mother to claim," I replied, my voice steady despite the fear that pulsed through me. He slammed his fist on the table, his anger flaring. "You're being unreasonable. This money rightfully belongs to us," he snapped, his voice filled with entitlement. Tears welled up in my eyes as I faced the painful reality that the man I once loved had become a stranger, consumed by his own greed and selfishness. "David, this money is my chance to build a better future for myself. I cannot surrender it simply to appease your desires," I pleaded, my voice quivering with a mixture of sadness and determination. His eyes narrowed, his voice dripping with contempt. "If you don't comply, I will make sure you have nothing. You will regret defying me," he threatened, his words meant to intimidate. But I refused to be cowed by his empty threats. In that moment, I realized that my journey towards freedom and self-discovery was worth far more than any material possession. "David, I will not allow fear to dictate my choices. I will fight for what is rightfully mine, and I will not be controlled by you or anyone else," I declared, my voice unwavering. Days turned into weeks as the divorce proceedings grew more contentious. The courtroom became a battleground filled with bitter exchanges and attempts to discredit my character. But I remained resolute, determined to protect my rights and my future. With each passing day, the facade of our once shared life crumbled, revealing the true nature of the relationships that had entangled me. The painful truth settled upon my shoulders like a heavy burden. My marriage had been built on a foundation of lies, manipulation, and the illusion of lies, manipulation, and the illusion of love. Finally, the day of the final hearing arrived. The room was filled with tension as we faced each other across the courtroom, our eyes locking in a battle of wills. As the judge announced the dissolution of our marriage, I felt a mix of relief and sorrow wash over me. With the divorce papers in hand, I approached David, my voice laced with a newfound strength. "This is the end, David. Our paths diverge from here," I stated, my words cutting through the lingering bitterness. He glared at me, a mix of anger and resentment etched on his face. "You will regret this," he spat out, his voice filled with venom. But I stood tall, no longer bound by the fear of his words or the shackles of a toxic relationship. Regret is no longer a part of my future. I choose freedom and happiness. I replied, my voice filled with resilience. And with that, I turned away, leaving behind the remnants of a broken marriage. As I walked out of the courtroom, a wave of liberation washed over me, mingling with the bittersweet taste of newfound independence.